Chapter 11 o Saturnastra y Lady Godiva. The location: the first guard tower of the citadel facing the village, secret underground tunnel, A6. Year 10, month 3, day 15, 9 p.m. Since when a lot smoother than Lady Godiva could have anticipated, and Duke Undine was a clever monster, and he figured that he could still make money from his grain reserves and keep the population happy. And this was all thanks to the works of charity, and at night Godiva acted in honor of her namesake by riding Arion nude, and during this time he was sneaking to the citadel, and he smelled iron and minerals, and was naturally drawn to the palace to supplement his draconic diet. And tonight, like all of the other nights, Lady Godiva had gone on a joyride, and as usual the girls had ridden before her to warn the townspeople that Godiva was going on her usual expedition. And the Duke was watching the proceedings with mild amusement, and while inside his castle the Duke wore more comfortable than attires, and his guards too were watching the scene, and while he watched, the Duke ate an apple, and the Duke had never tasted a fruit like apples, and apples tended to grow in the other continents. And Godiva had felt like introducing it to the continent of Berthame, and the Duke said aloud, "She's been rather lively lately." "Yes, sire," said one of the guards, agreeing with his ruler. The Duke went back to sulking, and while the Duke continued looking at the scene, he had climbed down a ditch and made his way into one of the hidden passages. And originally the Duke's father had built many underground passages for the eventuality of the citadel falling, and though the Duke had lived in his father's masterpiece many years, he had yet to discover all of the hidden entrances and corridors. And the Duke also did not know that his father had simply added new passages to the already existing labyrinth that lay beneath their hold. And it was through one of these many passages that he used to make his way inside the citadel. And he made his way across the dark corridors, and he did not need to use torches, and his eyes could see all in the darkness. And all the corridors were a nesting ground for fat rats and spiders, and the place was narrow enough for at least 5 people to pass by side by side, and the roof hung low. And a full-grown adult would have lowered his head to avoid hitting the roof, and said how he was built like a child, the roof was just right for him. And he liked this secret passage and the darkness around it, the dust, it felt almost nostalgic. And he would spend many hours inside this dark passage, and sometimes he would feed the rats and the spiders. At other times he would moan in order to frighten the people at the other side of the wall. They're like, "Oh, you're pretending to be a ghost." By now, Godiva had finished her nightly rounds, and the Duke had the gates lowered for Godiva to return, and musing he yelled at her, "So you leave naked and return clothes?" "Wouldn't you like to know?" said Godiva coyly, and she added, "We leave at sunrise tomorrow." "What? Leaving so soon?" said the Duke sarcastically. "And there are more mouths left to feed in my territory?" "Nah, if I fed them anymore, they might get fat and lazy. And I gave them the tools and the techniques to help themselves," said Godiva, dismounting her horse Arion. "You don't say," said the Duke, thinking of his own fat and lazy family members. A fat, ugly wife who gave him 3 fat, ugly boys, and on top of that, the Duke had to put up with his wife's fat, ugly relatives, and they knew how he felt about them, and they mutually avoided each other like the plague. And whenever he was in his citadel, his family was out visiting this relative, and whenever his family were in the citadel, he chose that day to go out hunting. And as of now, the being closest to his heart was his favorite hunting dog, Francesca. And after this brief exchange of words, Godiva guided Arion to the stables, and from there she went to look for Ahi within the hidden passages. And when she found him, she said to him, "Ahi, we will be leaving tomorrow." Ahi said gibberish softly. "Okay, suit yourself," said Godiva, not questioning Ahi. Said Ahi. And she took his hands in hers and said, "Take care of yourself, son, and don't let those ants push you around." Ahi nodded in response. Godiva went to get her things prepared, and he went to fish out a new attire from his traveling bag, and his nightly excursion had all of his attires covered in cobwebs. After Godiva left, he started exploring the feudal towns, and he still was teased by the other children, and the teasing stopped when rumors about him came flooding in, and in time no parent would allow the children to play with Ahi, and since the people in town were avoiding Ahi, he started focusing his attention on the citadel. There he always found a lot of shiny baubles for him to stuff down, and one day he set his eyes on the Duke's crown, and the crown had been passed down from generation to generation, and it was 1,390 years old, and at the time the Duke's family had conquered the southern portion of the continent, and when the third king failed to have any male heirs, the ruling class went to war, and the one great empire broke down into little feudals, and all that remained of their own house's former glory was that crown. And the Duke did not care much for the crown, and he simply had it stored away under heavy security more out of habit. And the first and last time he wore the crown was at his coronation, and the crown was made of solid gold, and on the rings he had the patterns of a triangle emeralds, followed by a round diamond, and on top and the bottom of the diamonds it had one inlaid pearl. And the emerald jewels were held by a star of 5 points, and the top part of the head was made of velvet cashmere, and the horns of the crown had many jewels, and they followed the pattern of big jewel triangle followed by a smaller one. And the smaller one was a pearl at its tip, and the biggest one had an emerald tip, and overall it was a luxurious piece of jewelry of a bygone era. Unlike his previous death, this item was the easiest one to steal, and most of the security was focused on the gates of the pattern, and once you were on the inside, it was easy to move around. And due to his frequent visits, some of the servants had started thinking that he was part of the family, and also he was always dressed for the part, and some even started thinking that he was one of the Duke's many bastards. And thus his presence went unnoticed during his nightly excursions. And tonight, like the other night, he entered the citadel through one of the many underground passages, and this was a newly discovered passage which led to a broken-down chapel in the outskirts of the town. And the outskirts had a few ruined buildings here and there, and in the former glory days, the town was an industrious city, and over time, war and poverty had caused the city to shrink, and for that reason, the town was surrounded by many vacant, crumbling buildings. And what remained of the city chapel were a few columns, the atrium, the altar, and of these only the altar did not look as if it was crumbling, and the burnt stones and wounds and the rest seemed as if it would fall apart any minute. And he liked this chapel because he had a rose window at the atrium, and only half of the window frame remained, and the shadows hinted at its once glorious decoration, and behind the altar, the marble floor had an uneven tile, and whenever springs were grown was slowly opening the hidden passage. And tonight he wore a Dutch Baroque attire, and the waist had a golden sash, and he wore this attire with a black hat and a white feather. And he entered the chapel with a single fast swooping motion, and it was a sort of domineering walk. Blood red took whenever he was entering the battlefield, and his posture, stride, and blood red eyes echoed battle, and his shoulders face and playful smile, and the way he had his hands shyly behind his back echoed innocence. And indeed, he prided himself in being a walking contradiction. And when he got behind the altar, he went on all fours to feel for the depression on the floor, and he removed his gloves to better feel the ground, and he already knew where the depression was located. However, he enjoyed the act of searching for it and finding it anew. And he liked the way that the marble fell beneath his fingertips, and the way he felt the ground with his agile fingers was reminiscent of a pianist playing his instrument. And he found the depression, and his eyes became alive and vibrant, and he rose from the ground and swiftly to sacrilegiously sit on the altar. And he watched with amusement the dark pit open before him, and then he jumped within, and the sound of his shoes touching the stone ground made echoes across the empty hall, and he said below his breath in imitation of someone, "Then silence and stillness nice were the universe." And the echo repeated, "Verse, verse." And he said, "Hello." The echo responded, "Oh, oh." A bit of a gravel from the roof fell on his head, and this reminded him of why he was underground in the first place. And the trip into the citadel was rather complicated, and from time to time he had to dig through some broken corridor or to take a different adjacent route. And many detours, digging and pushing and curving through narrow passages, and he arrived into the treasure room. And he pushed through the tile above him, which gave way to his strength, and this made the rusty mechanism open the path into the treasure room. And while the floor above him opened, a shower of golden coins fell upon his head, and the sound it made echoed across the empty corridors. And he covered his head annoyed, and when the shower of coins ended, he was waist deep in golden coins, and he used the coins as leverage to climb to the floor above him. And he looked into the darkness and saw golden coins glittering under the faint light that came into the room. And he frowned when he saw this, and he said as his eyes filled with tears, "Oh, what a bother." And he shook his head with resolution, and he pressed the uneven tile, which closed the hidden path, and he moved some nearby coins from the pile to mask his entrance, and he took care to remove any coins from his clothing. And when he was done, he took a few minutes to peruse the treasure room. And the treasure room was relatively large, roughly 20 by 14 by 8 feet, and it had no windows, with the only one door leading towards the outside, and the air came from 4 air shafts cut into the stone, and those shafts faced the courtyard, and the shafts were no larger than 2 bricks. And the room had 7 ceremonial armors, one in each corner, with 3 lined up in the center of the room, and all of the armors were made during a different era, and they were made solely for the purpose of the king's coronation, and the last armor, a golden armor, was the one that the Duke had worn, and he only wore it whenever he wanted to dazzle the crowd. And aside from the armor, there were a few weapon stands with ceremonial claymores, bows, swords, and knives. And there were 10 safes. Each one was filled with precious stones and other items. Only the Duke and he knew the password. And on the wall there were hung a single painting. The Duke had stashed it there since he could neither stand to look at it, nor could he bring himself to part with it. The painting was covered behind a velvet curtain to keep people from looking upon it, and the rest of the room had boxes and cabinets filled with treasures. And littered in the floor were hundreds of money bags and coins, and the Duke was making so much money this day that his men simply threw the bags in there unceremoniously, without bothering to count them. And the crown covered by a heel was hidden inside one of those safes, and he had seen it when the Duke had returned it to its resting place. And he went to the safe, and it was a single combination lock, and the password was 43 to the right, 14 to the left, and 97 to the right. And the safe opened with a low groan, and he ignored the jewels, the pearls, the parcels, books, and other items very important. He held the crown in his hand as if mesmerized by it, and his red eyes glowed like twin flames. And he smelled the crown from side to side, and he removed the velvet top to reveal more of the metal of the crown. And he took a bite of the pearly top, and the pearls and the golden plates made a dull crunching sound within his sharp fangs. And he ate the big pointy star of the crown, and he decided to save the rest for later. Such a delectable treat couldn't be eaten altogether at once. He went to the place where he had entered, and he dusted the ground with his feet, and he frowned when he removed every golden coin from the ground, and he felt that his arms were holding on to the crown, and the mechanism which opened the door had gotten jammed by the fallen coins. And he sighed with frustration, and he took a small bite from the crown before walking towards the single door of the treasure room, and he knocked unceremoniously. The guard sleeping on the other side awoke with a start, and the guard's armor had a leather vest with the insignia of the Duke. And the insignia was a stylized 4-pointed star, and it was a representation of the northern star Polaris, and it symbolized the Unhai's aspiration to conquer the north. And the guard thought he had heard a knocking in his sleep, and again he settled down to continue his nap, guard duty, and again he knocked on the door. And growing impatient, he was almost tempted to break the door down. And the second time he knocked, the guard got up and he opened the door, and when he saw he frowned. "I still half asleep," he said. "Boy, did you get locked in there by accident?" And he nodded in response. And the guard walking up a bit looked at his head, and he noticed that he was looking at his head, and he removed his hat to allow the guard to get a better look at him. And when the guard saw his blood-red hair, it felt as if someone had thrown a bucket of cold water at him. The guard said, shaken, what are you doing? Never mind, it is not as if you would understand the last thing I needed." And he put back down his hat before taking a small bite from the crown, and the guard noticed that he had bitten down on something shiny, and the guard thought, "The Duke is going to kill me if he finds out. But if the kid took something, how would I explain the missing item? So I then retained the brat against his will. What would I do?" And the guard then said to he, "Can you show me what you're eating?" And he showed what was left of the ground, and smiling, he said in imitation of someone, "Bon appetit." And the guard saw the mango remains of the ground, and he started laughing, and he too joined in his maniacal laugh. And in no time the guard's laughter degraded into a wail, and crying, the guard brought his hands to his face, and crying and laughing, he said, "I am ruined. The kid, he ate the crown. He bit it with his sharp little dragon teeth. How did this calamity come to happen?" And he feeling bad for the guard, he petted his back. Oh, what am I going to do? I'm ruined. You ruined my life, continued the guard, wailing. And he felt sorry for the man, and he went into the dressing room, and he gave him a handful of coins. And the guard frowned when he saw what he considered a kind gesture, and the guard took a deep breath, and then regaining his composure. And he said to himself, it's okay, I can just blame it all on the kid. He's probably related to the Duke, seeing as though he knows the password combination. And again gave him a sideways look at his mouth, and the way his mouth reminded the guard of his toddler. And the guard took his hand, and he led him towards the night of first living quarter. And while walking, he started humming, and something about his humming made the silence of the night even more dreadful. The more the guard walked, the better he felt, and as he kept walking, one of the guards on duty detained him, and he asked, what are you doing outside your post? I found this intruder. He snuck into the dressing room using one of the secret passages, said the guard in a hurry. The other guard lifted at his head, and he frowned. Only he and Berthame had blood-red hair. And the other guard looked at him, and he asked, how long have you been sneaking into the palace? And he shrugged his shoulders in response, and the second guard said, yep, that's a he. The townspeople have been spreading all sorts of rumors about the little devil. All he says is ah, with an occasional psychotic phrase. So what did the little freak steal? If it is not too valuable, we can replace it. The first guard sighed, and he said, funny you should think so. No, this item cannot be replaced. A he. And he then showed the second guard what was left of the ground, and the second guard too became infected by the same insane maniacal laugh that had struck the first guard. And after the second guard finished laughing, he said in a long one, oh, we're fucked. Alright, so then that's the end of that chapter. Bye-bye and God bless.